conversation around youth being included in politics is one that is very pertinent for our generation to discuss. And joining me to discuss this very interesting topic relating to what extent have youth been included in the politics of today in Uganda, I'm being joined by a panel of distinguished lady and gentlemen who are going to help us unpack this conversation. My name is Douglas Drake, Onen, and I'll be your host, moderator for tonight's conversation. So I'll just begin from my extreme right. Jamada, just by way of introduction, just quickly let the viewers know exactly who you are. I know you've been on the show before, but for this particular section, you can go ahead and simply introduce yourself. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Drake. My name is Kalinda Jamada Musa, a final year law student at Makerere University, and I'm a very strong advocate for youth participation in governance and politics, which is a major component of governance.
Thank you. I'm very happy to have you here, and we're looking forward to getting those insights on governance and politics as well. Mr. OGUTU, most welcome.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to be back on this show. I'm TITUS OGUTU are my names, and I'm a lawyer by profession, and I'm happy to be here and discuss a few issues to do with youth in politics, especially when it comes to multi-party system in place. So it's a privilege to be here once again.
Thank you. It's definitely an honor having you once again after 2 years of going MIA. We're very happy to have you back.
Yeah.
The lady on the show, most welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Namale Alyce Grace. I'm a law student at the Makerere School of Law. I've been in politics, still am, and I'm very passionate about doing activism amongst the youth, for the youth, and women especially. So I'm happy to be here and talk about a very pertinent issue.
Thank you. We're looking forward to getting that perspective of women representation in politics, particularly young women in politics. The gentleman who has appeared on the show a couple of times, very happy to have you here. As just by way of introduction and letting the audience get to know who you are. Just say a few quick words and we can begin.
Okay, thank you very much, Drake. My name is Kinobere Andrew, and I'm a law student. I'm also passionate about youth involvement in politics because I believe it is that time when you start having these discussions.
Yeah.
And I'm also someone who aspires to maybe perhaps one day, lead the youth somewhere, somehow. And this conversation is one that is at heart for me. So I'm delighted to be here and I hope for a wonderful discussion.
Thank you. Just like you've heard it from our dear panelists tonight, it's a very strong panel of very strong men and lady who possibly will take our country forward in the next few years to come. But just before we get into the nitty-gritties of the conversation, I prefer that we possibly have a roadmap. Everyone can give us an insight on what exactly they think they will take on this conversation. So I'll just begin with the lady on the show, since they say ladies, gentlemen, so that. So I'll just start with you. How would you like to take on this conversation, your roadmap for tonight's discussion?
I think to begin with, right, we have to assess multi-party politics and its place in governance in Uganda today. And from there, from that angle, we assess how the youth have been included generally in the whole system of multi-party politics, but also independently in the parties. How have we seen the youth be integrated into these systems of the structures of governance, but also getting their participation in different activities of the parties? How engaged are the youth altogether in these different functions, in these different political parties, and how strong is their participation? It's not just them being included, but are they listened to? Do we see the results from them being included in the system?
Yeah. All right. Very, very, very wonderful insights as your roadmap. You're going to focus on multi-party politics. You will go ahead and assess the youth inclusion, but then bring up the aspect of youth integration in structures of governance. But lastly, the aspect relating to meaningful participation. I'll definitely engage you on those grounds. Let me just get straight to Jamada, then I'll come back this side to my brother Andrew. As a way of roadmap as well, how do you exactly tend or look at taking on this conversation?
Well, I think when it comes to youth participation in multi-party politics, two things are very important for me. One is the contribution of political parties to young people's development, but also the general outlook on society's development. And secondly, I think it is the end of this discussion, which is managing expectations and being realistic when it comes to youth participation within politics. So you do not have to expect that at any point, just because you're a young person, you should be listened to even when what you're saying is not worth listening to. So those two things, managing expectations as well as the contribution of these political parties to young people's
I
participation.
am more interested in management of expectations, which I'll definitely engage you on those grounds, because talk about management of expectations, definitely going to raise some eyebrows,
Yes.
particularly from a particular faction of the population who ally with a particular party, who say we must remove a dictator, and you tell them to manage expectations. Definitely you raise their eyebrows, but shall get to that. Council OGUTU. What, by way of your roadmap and how you exactly intend to take on this conversation, what do you want to engage on?
Well, the topic is wide, and I think it's best we start from the grassroots. My main aim is to start the discussion from the grassroots, especially from the youth. Okay, what movements have been there to move the youth agenda, and to what extent have these youth been involved in the various political parties. But also, I am interested in understanding who is responsible for driving the youth agenda in Uganda. And I really want to question the National Youth Council and its value to this country per se. And I will have a discussion to do with the historical perspective, especially when it comes to the development of youth involvement in multi-party politics. And I will also look at the principles of democracy, if they have been respected by the youth, vis-a-vis the principle of interest and identity. So I would like to put my discussion grounded around there, seeing whether the individual merit still beats the end goal of youth involvement in the politics of this country. So that will be my discussion.
Perfect. Yeah. Andrew, just by way of a roadmap to this conversation, how do you tend that you are going to go about it?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I believe that the best way to tackle this and the best way to properly have a rhetoric about this, about tonight's conversation, comes from a question, a simple question. What do we intend to achieve by including the youth into politics? Yeah, and that is majorly representation. And not just in representation, we want effective representation. Because if I'm to look at the kind of representation that we are having, you tell me that we have 5 youth MPs in parliament, but the law in itself is already restrictive on these 5 members of parliament. It's saying that these members don't have any say when it comes to the issues that happen in parliament. Then that is not representation. You know, we're having people who are occupying the offices to get the salary and maybe put out a facade to the community that we have in representation. So to me, the debate that I would expect to have would be around what do we expect to achieve, and that is representation. Because at the end of the day, even if we are being seen in the spaces, you know, and the representation is not as effective as it's supposed to be, then it is as good as the debates that we shall have.
Yeah.
And you know, yeah. So
perfect. All right. I'll get to you, OGUTU. You mentioned about historical perspective on youth involvement, and that is, I think, an area that I'd like us to begin this conversation on. And right away from history, our culture has been driven by young people, but then we saw an overhaul on twist of events when eventually the age bracket started rising, and today the people that lead us are averagely 65. Our cabinet has an average age of 65. So just give us a historical perspective on youth involvement in driving this country forward, and then bring us forward to where we are today. Then we shall pick up from there.
Well, when we are talking about youth in politics in Uganda,
yeah,
it really dates back. If I'm to give a year, probably 1919, but to bring it closer, we will talk about the Obote regime. And Obote one of the things that drove him to power was actual involvement of youth. And it is the same story with our brothers in Kenya.
Yeah.
Okay, before we had Jomo Kenyatta, whom people speak a lot about, we had a guy who is even not spoken about. He's called Harry Tuku, the first guy that established the Youth Kikuyu Association before the Jomo Kenyattas and the Mau Mau movements came in. So when you come back to Uganda, the discussion starts from the Obote I regime. And Obote I, in as much as politics at that time was being driven on two principles, that is self-determination and anti-colonialism. Those were the two main things, okay? But there was this vibrant force that had not been exploited, and those were the youth, okay? So when we move ahead, when the UPC got into power, we saw that he established the National Youth Union of Youth Organization. But that organization was basically for agricultural development, okay? And then later on, he established the National Union of Students of Uganda. Now, interestingly, that union was only for young people that had accessed a level of education, okay? So you can see the gap. The other group was for agricultural development and socio-economic transformation, etc. But the other was for those who had accessed a level of education. But of course, when the Idi Amin regime came in, he banned the National Union of Youth Development and seized some of their activities. And what we saw were actually things that are happening recently. For example, to the Nupe people, arrests, brutal arrests, murders, and disappearances. That's what happened during the Idi Amin regime. Idi Amin, I think, understood the exercise very well, that young people are a force that if it starts protesting, change can happen. But later on, we then got into the Uganda Development Youth Organization, which later on led to the birth of the National Youth Council. Yeah. So basically, those are some of the associations that have been around to bring about youth involvement in politics. But the other diversion would be is that who is moving these youth at the end of the day? What is their end goal? Because right now, the main aim is removing the dictator. As in simple terms, that's what people are looking at. But my major question would be, what is the ideology of some of these political parties so that the youth can interest themselves? You understand? If you carried out a survey, I don't think people in the rural areas understand the NRM ideology. I don't think some people who subscribe to the political parties, for example, the National Unity Platform, understand the ideology of NUP. And yet it is a good one. The FDC, the DP, to mention but a few. This country has about 26 political parties as per the records of Electoral Commission, 26. But only about 4 are known, and that is where the youth are hiding. What about the others? Who's talking about them? Sadly, the majority of the youth are in rural areas. The ones in town are the educated ones, okay? So the point goes back to, yes, we have had youth movements, but at the end of the day, what is their ideology? My brother here mentioned about the Constitution, the 1995 Constitution providing for youth representation. But that Constitution, if you read it very well, it provides for youth representation as a special interest group. Now the question is, you as a youth who is in your 25, 26, 27, clocking 30, are you a marginalized person? The other question is, who is a youth in this country? Okay? A youth is a person, the Constitution says 18 to 30. Yeah. Okay? But what does society believe? Society believes 3 things. 1, financial independence. 2, are you married? 3, do you have children? Now, at that point, are you capable of being a leader? Now, that's the question that is posed to various political institutions in this country. Okay. Have they provided ground to mentor these people for the leadership they seek.
Okay.
Okay, and maybe to just conclude this on that very question would be, you know, we are now dealing with post-liberation politics. What is at center stage? We are looking at commercialization of politics right now, and interestingly to note from the speeches of His Excellency President Museveni, he has never made a speech and failed to talk about the guerrilla war. I have never heard him miss to say something that we fought for this country. And to take you back, youth in this country started with the Kadogo movements, because when the guerrilla war started, they were called the Kadogos, the young people, the Kadogos, okay, because it was a huge demographic that was sought. So what is happening right now is we're having post-liberation politics, where we are seeing that there is instilling of fear, which later on intensifies emotions and kills the value of reason. That is what is happening. And the youth are locked there. They do not know what they want. And we are exploiting politics for personal gains at the end of the day.
All right, fair enough. That has been a very, very robust and intriguing perspective that you bring. And I think we shall interrogate that further. But let me get to Jamada, and then I can come to the other panelists. Jamada, when you listen to the historical perspective that it gives us, you see that young people have been greatly involved in politics in this country. But then that couldn't possibly be the reason today. Take us up to speed as regards to multi-party politics in this country, the birth of multi-party politics in this country, and then look to what extent are actually young people included. Because to the best of my knowledge, the avenues where young people possibly have some sort of representation is we have 5 members of parliament, we have the National Youth Council, and then we have the recently formed National Youth Parliament, which was formed by a couple of NGOs who came together that sits once a year in the month of August. Take us up to speed, up to those grounds on youth representation.
Maybe we also have a senior presidential AD
on youth affairs, which it's still a recent.
And a minister.
Yeah, it seems you want to push us in a certain direction, but I do not intend on going there. I think one thing that is very important to note at this point is that Drake mentioned that the average age of the people who are leading us right now is 65. That means that by the time this government came into power 30-something years ago, these people were around 30, 35. So by the time they came into power, they were what we consider right now the youth. And they've managed to retain that power for a substantial amount of time, to which some people consider dictatorship and others do not. But when it comes to the question of multi-party politics, at least in Uganda, Uganda at first was a singular party state where we had one party after the 1995 constitution, which was subsequently amended to introduce the multi-party political system. And there was a whole campaign and a whole referendum in that regard. And the arguments that were being made at that point were that in order for us to have more representation, or at least more effective representation, we have to have people with diverse ideas express them in their own groups. And the question right now is, how effective have those alternative ideas been represented in the multi-party form of politicking within Uganda? And I think that's a whole different question that could take on a discussion. But I think the question that is important for this discussion today is how those multi-parties have contributed to the political representation and political participation of the youth and young people in the country. And the answer to that is a question that my friend here asked. Because they've become, because they've created some sort of monetization of politics, young people are peeking into that. And secondly, another question that has come up is the question of ideology. That because of the lack of ideology of these political parties, the only two things that they could provide, at least instant gains, are finances and 2, aspirations to get rid of the dictator. So a young person who wants to get involved in democracy, those are the only 2 things that they could aspire to obtain from any political party within the country. And either political party provides those things, and it attracts a number of young people, or it doesn't provide any of those things, and therefore will not have young people participating in its governance. But I think still when it comes to the general picture of how multi-party politics is working out within Uganda right now, it's very important to talk about the National Youth Council, which many have ended up looking at as an NRM, National Youth Council.
And I
Without
agree with
question, people seem to agree. And without question, the mode of voting for the National Youth Council is extremely leans into the ruling government. And there would be questions about whether this is right or not, because as a ruling government, it has the influence to influence the inworks of the National Youth Council. So it would be quite obvious that anyone who wants to work in a national institution would have to somehow support the ruling government. And I do not think there is anything wrong with that. However, the only challenge that I see with that is the representation of the youth ideology and values and aspirations and challenges by an organization that feels like it should lean more into protecting and supporting every position taken by the government. Because when it comes down to the question of ideology, and I think this is the point that I want to push this discussion into where I think it should be, youth have challenges. And unless a political party addresses those challenges within their major agenda, they are not contributing anything towards the aspirations of young people. Therefore, they are not contributing anything in increasing political participation of young people within their governance. So as a young person, my problem is probably employment. My problem is probably education. So unless a political party has that at the forefront of their governance or of their ideology and structure, anything else that I may seek within that political party will either be personal interests and gains or just fun. And for as long as political parties in Uganda, and I will later on distinguish the different contributions of different political parties, but for as long as they do not provide for substantive and crucial aspirations of young people within their ideology, they cannot really claim that they're contributing much to young people's political participation within governance and politics in general.
Wonderful. Alyce, just from as a way of an extension to what Jamada is talking about, I want us now to take the conversation to youth representation, which Andrew in his introduction made mention that he's going to interrogate effective representation. Earlier on mentioned the fact that we have the National Youth Council, we have 5 members of parliament, and one would argue that the fact that our parliament at the moment, the average age is 35, possibly we could have effective representation because many of the parliamentarians are young. But now, interrogate the aspect of youth representation, even in political parties as well, because we have over 20 political parties, but a few vibrant political parties. In the structures of those political parties, how do we see youth representation? Do we see them being included? Do we see them actually effectively putting out their views?
Well, to begin with, I think that it's important to note that political parties that show interest in listening to the youth attract a lot of the youth, and therefore they are quite vibrant. One would argue that that's the reason that NUP has succeeded in, being such a force, especially in the last election, because there was a person who could very, very comfortably identify with the youth, and the youth were attracted to this party because of that. Now, the representation of the youth overall, I think that in each political party, the leadership of that political party goes a long way in determining how the youth are absorbed in that party and how their views are being attended to.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is it's likely that if the top leadership of any organization is the youth, then they're going to be very listening towards the youth. And in the event that the top leadership, it doesn't even have to be a political party, organizations, when the top leadership of an organization is of an age bracket that is a bit higher, then even their attitude towards the youth might be friendly, but the way they approach the youth's ideologies is going to be different substantially. So for the youth to properly be represented, for them to not just show up in numbers, but to actually have substance contributed to anything, I would argue that it is important that we have a lot of people in the top structure that are the youth, if at all that is what we want to achieve, is representation. But I also have another problem. I think Jamada mentioned something about political parties attending to the aspirations of the youth. Now, I think that it is a problem that most of the youth's aspirations are along the lines of financial independence. It has been argued that as a generation, we do not have a generational mandate. And that's a big problem, because without a generational mandate, we do not have anything as a generation that we are striving for past our own personal gains. What does that mean? That means that substantially we do not have aspirations besides just wanting to get money.
Economic freedom
Our aspirations are, well, aspirations are for personal economic freedom, still not for the country. In the event that if Jamada got 50 million right now, we never hear it from Jamada again. You see, he's out of the struggle. He's out of it. He's done. It's nothing to do with I've gotten 50 million, but how do 50 other youth get 15 million in this country? You get my argument. So I think that even before we want political parties to listen to the aspirations of the youth should have aspirations that are national, that interest the entire nation, not just personal. And it is where I would counter-argue that I think more than the political parties listening to the aspirations of the youth, I think political parties should listen to challenges of the youth. Youth have a lot of challenges. But aspiration-wise, I think political parties should nurture the aspirations of the youth.
But then, quick question. How can we then have young people have a common aspiration? Because the fact is we have differing views all over. And as Ugandans or as young people, we lack that one thing that would put us together to fight. Possibly, jokingly, what unites Ugandans? Football, yeah? If there's Premier League, young people will make
Not even Ugandan football.
Not Ugandan football.
I support the Ugandan friends and KCC.
Nonetheless, football, right? Now, those are issues that would put young Ugandans together. What else? Memes. Things that really don't matter. When something really happens. Now, those are the times when young people come together. What is that one thing that we need to put our aspirations together to then, better push us forward?
It's exactly what I was leaning to. Yeah. My argument is that political parties have a big central role in shaping the aspirations of the youth. You see, if at all the political parties in themselves, yes, put aside their individualities and their personal differences, and they said that as a country, this is what we want to be. So even as we nurture our youth in our independent lines of achieving the goal is common. Right? So that would be an aspiration. If we want, as a country, to be at the 50-milestone in the next 10 years, yes, that is a common goal. NRM could say that we're going to get to the 50-milestone by flying, and NUP says no, we cannot afford to fly. We need to run, yeah, because we need to conserve the money for when we get to the 50 miles or whatever, right? But the goal is to all reach there, right? So if political parties could come together to at least identify where we want to go as a country, the vision, the general vision, regardless of how to get to that general vision, then I think it would go a long way in the parties themselves instilling those values in the youth that they attract. And then from the youth that are in the political party systems, there's a wider reach to youth that are not interested in politics per se.
All right. Andrew, I'm still on the aspect of effective representation. What Alice is talking about and us having that common aspiration. To the best of my knowledge, we have what they call the interparty, the interparty youth platform for dialogue. It's a platform that brings together youth leaders from various political parties to come together and front ideas that would possibly unite Ugandans. It's a recent development that I think began in the year 2021, and I'm looking forward to see the developments. The current president of that inter-party youth dialogue platform is Maxon Muhezi. But back to you, Andrew. Let's look at the aspect of effective representation, because my worry, I'm speaking from a perspective of an ordinary Ugandan who doesn't have the capacity to possibly even sit on this panel. That Ugandan who maybe just ended in primary 7 or senior 4, but also is not interested, but they want to, they have agendas they want to achieve, because politics is about serving the interest of those people even who are not interested in politics, but are affected by the outcomes of the politics that we play. So how can we achieve that effective representation?
Thank you very much, Drake. One, the first thing that we have to look at is the nature of representation that we are currently having. Yes, the nature of representation that we are currently having, as some of the other panelists have said, is one that is chasing a personal gain. You know, one that has been built on a history of chasing personal gains. You know, if you are to look at the kind of politics that we have built in Uganda over time, starting from our grandfathers and forefathers, it has been depreciating over time. They have all been targeting offices, at least the majority. They have all been targeting offices for a personal gain. What am I going to have at the end of the day? And this has even been built by the ideas that people have been having, that when you're in an office and you come out, people at the end of the day, they are going to say he was there, but he did nothing for himself. See that kind of ideology.
That's what Jamada talks about, managing expectations, right?
Yes, exactly. When you come out, they're like, what has he done for himself? You know? So this has become a chase of the bag at the end of the day. So in order to improve the nature of representation that we are having amongst the youth, we have to go down to the grassroots, where it started from. Because you cannot, if at all a tree is having an issue with its top, you don't start fighting it from the top. You know, you have to fight it from the ground. You know, so we cannot start by saying that the leaders that we are having are going to be able to solve the problems that are bringing up ineffective representation. We have to go down to the grassroots. You know, we have to do a complete generation kind of treatment. You know, because these are the ideologies even people in high school and all these things that are having. At the end of the day, these are leaders we are going to have. You know, so the biggest issue that we need to solve is the mindset amongst the youth. The mindset amongst these people that are going to take up leadership positions. You know, but at the end of the day, how are we going to be able to solve this mindset if at all even the leaders we are currently having are the ones that are giving us the problems that we are having? You know, it becomes quite difficult, but it is not impossible. You know, if we all agree that when we are put into these offices, we have nationalistic feelings, at least those ones I know right now, there are very few people or no current leaders that are having those nationalistic feelings.
But how patriotic are we, even as young people?
That's what I'm saying. If we dug, if we delved in deep and started searching and looking at the trends of how things are, at the end of the day, you're going to find that even when opportunities are there, they are restricted to a few people. You know, when there's, for example, an opportunity for the youth to be represented somewhere, you'll see the nature of representation. I don't need to talk so much about it, because Drake, I'll not speak like a blind person. You know, I have seen these things. You know, I have been privileged to attend some of these spaces where the youth are expected to be. You know, you see the nature of representation. Why in Nairobi for you lead a few weeks back, you could see the nature of representation. You know, if you went and asked those people that who amongst you is coming from the deep ends of Uganda, who amongst you, how did you reach here? How did you get an opportunity to represent the youth? You'll see the stories they'll be telling you. But that shouldn't be the nature of representation we are having, you know? So if we do this generational treatment, you know, it is going to help us raise up people who are more patriotic, you know, because it doesn't stop on us just having these discussions. We must act. You know, I've already said that at the end of the day, these things, conversations are here. There's now one person was making fun and was saying that conversations around youth representation, climate change are just funny, because when it reaches 2026, we're now going to have Agenda 2030. When it reaches Agenda 2030, we shall have Agenda 2050 to what? To help the youth. So these conversations are meaningless if we don't act upon them. So that action that we are going to put on these agendas that we are trying to move is what is going to help solve the problem of effective representation.
All right. Musa, I'd like to get to you. The idea that we want to be included in, we are questioning to what extent young people are included in the multi-party politics of today. And the panel largely agrees that to a small extent. But also we question the problem we as young people have, in that we also have an individual interest and gains that we want to achieve from those various positions that we take. In your introduction, you made mention that you're going to talk about management of expectations. How can we therefore how can we manage young people's expectations when they get into those positions? Because when we manage those expectations, it will lead me to the second question about youth engagement in decision making. You realize that young people being involved in multi-party politics would also translate into youth engagement and effective decision making. So how can we, one, look at achieving management of expectations, but also to what extent do we have youth engaged in meaningful decision-making processes?
Well, Drake, the question that you're asking is a very big question. And I think it deals with too many things. But I think one of the things that I would like to start with is the question of managing of expectations. Political participation, governance, and power are not things that are handed to anyone on a silver platter. They are things that people work for, that some fight for, and a lot of people have died for. Anyone who aspires to participate needs to understand this as the first point of entry when they want to aspire to be anyhow involved in politics. And that means that if you're a young person and you want to contribute to your community, you have to understand that you will, one, have to make sacrifices. You will have to go out of your way and look for your own opportunities. A lot of times, sometimes these opportunities are created for you, but a lot of times they won't be. And what does that mean? That it becomes your responsibility to seek out these opportunities.
Yeah.
And when it comes to managing expectations, I think that the aspirations of someone at the core should be to serve their community. So in one of the trainings that I do with the Ministry of Gender for young, there is a national organization that was set up by government. It's called the Children's Reference Group, and it's meant to represent the views of young people, children, within governance systems. And before these children can go into parliament and do any advocacy or anything, we found it imperative that they are trained on what constitutes advocacy, they are trained on what constitutes voluntary work, and they are trained on how to research and obtain information. Because you may ask for all these platforms of you participating, but when you get the platform, what happens? Are you going to start telling bedtime stories? No. You need to be able to look for the information that is relevant to what you're going to talk about and present it. Now, you see, all the things that I've talked about are very important. But the discussion that we are having here today is about the contribution of multi-party political parties to that. So if that is the aspiration of how effective representation should be developed, what are those political parties doing to achieve that?
Yeah.
The answer to that should be that each political party that exists within the country should have some sort of mentorship program for their leaders, training them on how they can effectively lead their fellow young people, managing their expectations and making them understand that leadership is about sacrifice, it's about going out of your way. But unless political parties, and I would like to add government agencies, although I know a few examples of government agencies that are trying to pick this up, but it's everyone's responsibility that wants to promote political participation of young people to ensure that they are trained to be able to do this. And when it comes to your second question about engagement of young people within politics, I think this is, again, a huge challenge because we've had a lot of instances where we have young people being invited for meetings and there is a gaze of them being engaged. And I think the starting point should have been the question of how many organizations look at the relevance of youth engagement. Some people will make decisions about youth without having any of them present. I remember I was attending the Day of the Girl Child, and the minister was very happy because for the first time, there were a lot more young people in the audience than old people. So sometimes you have celebrations about the youth, but then you have a lot more old people in the room than the youth.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to engagement, people need to understand that you do not make decisions for people without consulting them. Yes, and that's why the Constitution will provide for consultation for members of parliament and all that. So when it comes to decisions that affect young people, they should be consulted. But now when it comes to the post-consultation, what happens when you've consulted someone? You have the responsibility to put their ideas into consideration. And I think that's also, although some people have aspired to break the barrier on having these people involved, there is still a huge problem into putting these people's views that have been consulted into consideration when they're making decisions. So both those things have to be dealt with if we are to have effective engagement. And I want to give an example before I finish, and that's the example of COP. This has been one of the greatest demonstrations of a failure in effective engagement. You invite tons of young people to attend a conference, but when you have to have sessions of decision making, you'll close the doors on them and you just let them demonstrate on the streets and sleep in nice hotels. Some of them will even go on board skis. But when it comes to making actual decisions, you are not letting them participate. So young people who want to participate need to know that they need to have something to contribute, but when they contribute this, it should be taken on by those in authority.
Perfect. OGUTU, just how Jamada concluded, using that example of COP, where we see young people, many young people go for the event, but then when it comes to the aspect of youth engagement in decision-making process, those particular discussions that involve decision-making, young people are closed out of the room. Now, what are those barriers or obstacles preventing youth participation and inclusion in multi-party politics here in Uganda?
Well, you know, that cuts across, and it goes back. My sister here made some statement that we should have more of the youth up there. But even if we have them there, what will they do? It comes back to his question of managing expectations. But as a person, I believe that age of a politician is not a determinant of his abilities. It is his dedication and the vision that matters. And I would really use Nelson Mandela as an example. You know, he was in school, suspended, but he went back, got a law degree, chest, he didn't finish, he went back, he finished. Now, coming back to an example like COP 28, what frustrates me a lot is that too much English is spoken on such conferences, and it is true that we, the young people, have been exploited in disguise because we are taken there. I have a friend attending that conference who attended it, Hilda. I think Fridays for Future Uganda. They deal a lot in climate change. At one point, she even cried that she could not access education because her home environment was flooded. But even after she cried, what was the impact to the community or to the country at the end of the day? Only a few, I think about 10 of her friends benefited. They're the ones who are flying and attending the so-called COPs 28. Now, that leaves out. Now, remember, 81% of the young people live in rural areas. Trust me, there is someone in Maracha who doesn't know about COP 28 right now.
Definitely.
there's someone in Madiokolo who doesn't know that NUP exists.
Even in Kampala.
Okay?
Surprisingly, yes.
Yes, surprisingly, yes, because of maybe in the slum areas where the hustle guys, the ones who call themselves the ghetto,
But even in the slum,
stay.
you could find in a university and someone does
True, but at least someone would have a glimpse. You say climate change, at least a university student should be able to say something.
She's actually right.
Okay. Yeah, she's
had
right.
engagement with university students and asked them.
True.
Yeah.
And by the way, why would a university student not know anything about COP28? Because environment is not something they want to hear about. Things to do like environment. I led a tax club, but it was a problem for me to get 30 youth to discuss tax in a building. It was a problem. And I had to run from education department one up to the other until something happened. But it was not easy. So as I was saying that some people are not aware of some of these things.
Yeah.
And if we are to go in some of the rural areas, they do not know that such kind of discussions even happen at the end of the day. Okay? And to me, that is where my worry is.
Yeah.
Okay? In as much as we have the educated elite youth who speak too much English,
Like us.
like us here, there is that one who doesn't know anything and only cares about one thing. Elections are coming. I'm going to be recruited as an agent. I'm going to get 50,000 at the end of the day. And that's it. What next after that? It goes back. What was the ideology? My sister here made submissions on aspirations. What are the aspirations of that person after being a polling agent? What next?
No, I think something we really need to interrogate is poverty is a very huge problem that we
Yes,
young
yes,
people
yes.
are facing.
Yes.
And not having money in our pockets is that it's making us more like pawns that were being used to push an agenda of people who are not our age and who are already in the evenings of their years.
And I've gotten the money
Yeah,
to
and
fund
Clearly,
their
you are
agenda.
defining capitalism.
Yeah.
Well, you have taken the discussion to the other point because
Yeah,
we are wanting to look at the challenges they are facing,
Yeah.
not to get the effective representational participation we want. Why aren't they not there when bills are being passed at the final stage? Okay? We are down here on the streets protesting, but at the end of the day, nothing happens. I want to give you an example before I speak my mind to the challenges they face. Makerere has shut down about 3 times because of youth involvement in politics. And there are people who take some of these things for granted. Personally, I felt bad for the late Beweto, Butagira, the UCU guy who was killed in Makerere. I really felt bad because someone leaving Mukono to come to support a colleague in Wandegea is a spirit of love. It is something he sees in that particular person that other people don't see. Unfortunately, the NRM Youth League prefers to call the opposition youth as noisemakers. For example, most NRM people prefer that youth make a lot of noise. So if the new youth make a lot of noise, then what does it make of the NRM youth? Because at the end of the day, they also make noise. Giving an example is Jacob Elweru, when he was the chairperson, National Youth Council 2015. Profoundly, he no longer was. Of course, he no longer is. Profoundly came out and said,
Jacob,
I don't know if he's still there. Is he still? Wow, interesting. He should leave. He came out and said, he probably came out and said, we as the youth, we are supporting the age limit. He was amongst those people that really pushed for the age limit to be removed. But what does that speak to us? The challenges we face. One, we always want to get individual merit, and we don't focus on the policies that can move youth agendas at the end of the day. Okay? We are focusing on, if the president sees me kneeling down like the way the doctors did at Kololo, maybe money is going to be increased, maybe salary is going to enter into our pockets. Unfortunately, I'm now told that internship scheme of doctors is being, they are finding a way of curtailing it, you know. You can either choose to do it or not to do it because government is like, we're not going to pay at the end of the day. So we are hiding ourselves in things like unemployment, poverty, disease, etc., etc. But the truth is, individually, we want to show the elders that actually we are also doing something for a political party. But the discussion shouldn't be looked at the youth in the various political parties. There is this youth who does not want to know about NRM and FDC and no, he just wants to have a good life. Just like the way Ugandans we are known for, partying is our thing. But at the end of the day, my major question goes back is, what ideology are we basing on to get into politics at the end of the day? NRM has 4 good principles. 1, patriotism, Pan-Africanism, socio-economic transformation, and democracy. And trust me, democracy runs across all these political parties. But the question is, how many youth understand what democracy is? Okay? You want to talk about all the rights in Chapter 4 of the Constitution, but at the end of the day, you're the one saying, if I get my 50 million, ganchita. You get? So I think we are losing focus. 1, no one is born a good citizen. That is the truth. And no country is born to understand what democracy is. The thing is that the two evolve as a continuous process after a lifetime. So going back to the challenges we are facing, I think the current parliament has over 100 and something people who are in the age bracket of 30 to 40, around there, 100 something. But majorly of the youth in parliament, well, they have the space, but I think they have not exploited it abundantly because they get caught up in the wars of politics at the end of the day. And the major aim as to why I discredit the National Youth Council is because of the mode of representation. I personally don't feel that the college system is conducive for youth representation to the National Youth Council and how the 5 regions, I think 5, the youth MPs are represented at the end of the day. They tell us at youth council level, village level, parish level, but I mean, it just doesn't make sense. What are going to be the outcomes of that representation? It's totally not understood. You get that point?
Yeah, I do.
So,
thank you.
We do not know what we want. I unfortunately want to say it, in as much as I'm educated, I really want to say that the young people do not know what they want. They know what they think is right, but they do not know how to get it. And that is the challenge that NUP faces. Why? They have an ideology, but they are considered to be noisemakers, and that is it.
Okay, let's just engage quickly, Alyce and Andrew. I'm still on the aspect of the barriers that are affecting youth inclusion and participation. He has highlighted a couple of them, from individual interest to challenges with political parties relating to that as well, and numerous other factors. In your own opinion, I want to focus mainly on women representation. Is there a challenge that we are having to see that women are actually, young women, young girls are included into the political scene?
Right, thank you. But before I get into that, I'm going to just address a general problem, the whole general problem of money.
Yeah.
Usually, even when we say personal interests, what we are tending to is financial personal interests, right? And I think it's a big problem in youth representation, basically in the politics of a country, right? So I think that it is very important to decommercialize politics. In the event that we knew for a fact that a member of parliament gets 500,000 a month, I think the number of people that would want to be member of parliament would significantly decrease. Right? Okay. I'm saying in the event that that it was set that a member of parliament gets 500,000 a month, I think the number of people that would want to be member of parliament would decrease substantially.
Don't you think that would increase the levels of corruption?
No, that's what I'm getting to. The handmaiden of corruption is commercialization of politics. Yeah. For you to be able to be corrupt, right? For you to be able to bribe people to get into positions, it means that even from your political position, you're getting a substantial amount of money.
I think for corruption, I think corruption is it's a personal thing. It's just how someone is built. Because we have seen people who
Andrew.
still have a lot of money, but are the most corrupt.
Andrew, if money was
Easy.
put to you here today and be
Yeah.
like, do this, they put for you bags of money. It's very unlikely that a young person would say no.
That's what I'm saying. It depends on the person.
But give him a short example. The Minister of Finance was crying recently that Mr. President, corruption. Recently, he was in the Mabati saga.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's a personal thing that even people will still earn shit. So corruption is not about how much someone will give you.
Not even just a personal thing. It's about the availability for you to be corrupt. Right?
Interesting.
You cannot be corrupt if you don't have what to be corrupt with. That's what I'm saying. That if we decommercialize politics, we are cutting a very big stronghold of corruption. Right? That means that but when people will be getting into politics, their focus will be less on the money because the money is little, right? And it will be more
On service delivery.
exactly. So we'll know that people are getting into positions not for the monetary gain per se, but because they have something that they think they can contribute to the governance of the country, right? If the presidential office did not have a classified budget of 300 and something billion, for example, right? Then it would be hard for there to be corruption in the office. If the office had 100 million instead of 300 and something billion, it would be very hard for the office to channel that money into corruption when there are basic things that office needs, right? So if you decommercialize politics, if politics is no longer really about money, if the money that people get in politics is significantly decreased, I think it would tend to attracting people with the right mindset into politics. But then,
Let me find. How much do you think youth councillors earn? Or else Chairman LC1?
but you see,
They earn around 250 plus a bicycle. Would you consider them as corrupt people?
I would think that they are significantly less corrupt than people than members of parliament, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So with that put aside, I think the other issue is optics. Even with women representation now, leading into your question, optics. I think that we care a lot more about optics than we do about meaningful contribution, which was part of my roadmap. The last aspect of my roadmap was how effective is the contribution. I mean, it's not just about the numbers, it's not just about being seen. It's about how whatever you've done there actually impacts. I think it's important to know, just like the COP example that Jamada gave, and similarly with, for example, the National Youth Parliament, I'd argue it's more optics than significant, contribution. We want the world to see that the youth have gathered in the Parliament of Uganda, and they have talked, and they have very good pictures, by the way. I think they have a very good budget for PR and videography, and so the pictures are looking really good and going all over the place.
Costumes.
But the costumes, right? the wigs. Okay, but then when that is done, when we go back home, can we evaluate how anything
The motions
argued
move
in the
and-
National
and-
Youth
yeah,
Parliament
I think.
has been driven through to the end? Okay, not even being driven through. Anything being argued there, how has it been tabled? How has it been followed through? It may not be to the end, but is there progress? If we argued in this National Youth Parliament that we should have more involvement in, for example, climate action, we should have the
Green
government.
skills, yeah.
We should have the government coming up with a lot of more schemes that preserve the environment. Have we seen the government actually do that? Have we? I mean, it just stopped there till next year in August, when we're going to come again and now rant about another problem and speak good English, as OGUTU said, right? I think it is important that we first, optics are good, but we need to see the impact, the effect of the things that youth discuss. We need to see that when we have women in a conversation, I am not on the panel just so that they don't say that this panel had only men, right? I'm on the panel
because you
because
must be there.
not even because I must be there, but because you're actually interested in listening to what's the women's perspective. You're actually interested in listening. You did not invite me here because your donors said, I think that you cannot have that this does not look good for us, right? I'm here because you're actually interested in listening to what would the female perspective be on a particular topic.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Andrew, just quickly as we go for a break, we want to get your insights. You understand that in 2021, the voter turnout, particularly for young people, was low, and yet we constitute close to 80% of the population. And that number could translate into the aspect of us possibly the idea of voting, of removing the dictator. If all of us went and voted, it would definitely make a lot of change. From my district in Gulu, particularly in Badege, young people didn't vote. So I think the voter turnout of young people was at 30% and yet they constitute the majority in Badege division. So, and that alone affects the aspect of representation, the aspect of engagement in decision making, among others. Interrogate that.
Thank you, Drake. I want to start by posing a question. Should we really blame the youth for not voting? Should we blame them? Why do I ask? Why do I start by asking that? Is that in recent times we have had elections. Elections are not new to Uganda. Uganda is one of the reasons as to why some Western countries characterize us as being democratic is because we have elections every after 5 years. You know, when they were interrogating Museveni, he said that a dictator who is voted, they were asking about dictatorship, like a dictator who is voted every after 5 years must be a very good dictator. So if that is the kind of a political situation in Uganda, then why should we even blame the youth for not voting? Because we have elections every after 5 years. Perfect. That is what is supposed to happen. We have an electoral commission that organizes this election. Perfect. But the results of the election, are they ones that really that people are contented with? The processes that we have towards the elections, are they really the ones that that we desire? Because particularly in Kampala, most people fled Kampala because of what they were expecting was going to happen. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. We didn't have the turmoil that. Not unfortunately. sorry. Unfortunately, the people who expected it to happen. Yeah, because people expected a lot of violence. I don't know why someone would sit down and say that people we are going to fight. We are going to. So to those people, unfortunately, it didn't happen. But to us who didn't want it, fortunately, it did not happen. You know, there was a lot of peace in Kampala because of course, the military presence and all that. But even with that, we shouldn't blame the youth for not going to vote because of the system we have. We know that even if we went, and people have this ideology of, I'm not saying people have this ideology of, let us remove the dictator. People go and vote to remove the dictator, but nothing happens. You go to the polling station, and there's going to be violence, you know, which they say is orchestrated by the youth, you know. So at the end of the day, I wouldn't blame the youth for not going to vote, because at the end of the day, if your vote doesn't matter, then it is as good as not casting it. So what should be the solution? The solution should be electoral reform. If we want the youth to go out and vote, then we should have reforms in the electoral system. It's as simple as that. Because if I know that at the end of the day, my one vote...
Reforms to what effect?
The reforms to the effect that if I go and cast my vote, you know, my one vote, it is going to have an impact at the end of the day. It is to that effect. Because if we don't have reforms to that effect, then my vote, me sitting at home and watching the election violence from my TV, and you who's going to cast your vote, you collect your group of 30 people to go and cast your votes, and still they don't make a change. Me who stayed at home and it's probably not working with that cast on my arm because I was beaten, I'll be better off. You know? So at the end of the day, we shouldn't blame the youth for not voting. What we should blame is the system that makes them not want to vote. And that is what should be corrected to resolve it.
Okay. It's quite sad. It's very sad that as young people in this country, we sit here, talk about the effects of this government negatively, and maybe hope for a change, but then we are not sure when that change is going to come.
Okay.
And I think it's imperative on all of us and in all the spaces that we are in. That change maybe one day will come, but when we are there, I think we should do something different. Because we may speak today, the president spoke sometime when he was a young man, that the problems with African leaders is those who overstay in power. And you are all here on this space, and this is going to be there. It's going to be on the internet till you perish. So be careful whatever you say here.
We'll be quoted in the future.
Yeah,
She
definitely.
said.
So let's just go for a quick break. We'll be right back. Thank you.
National Water and Sewage Corporation is committed to providing cost-effective, clean, safe and reliable quality water and sewage solutions in urban centers across Uganda. National Water and Sewage Corporation reaffirms its commitment to 100% service coverage, geographical expansion, infrastructure development, water quality, pro-poor initiatives, customer care and stakeholder engagement, catchment and water source protection. Be a water hero. Pay your bills to zero balance. Report all leaks, busts, and illegal water connections to enable us serve you better. Reach us through our toll-free numbers on 0800 200 977 or 0800 300 977. You can also communicate with us through any of our online platforms or visit the National Water and Sewage Corporation office nearest to you. This message is brought to you by National Water and Sewage Corporation.
Welcome back from that break. Tonight we're discussing to what extent are youth included in today's multi-party politics in Uganda. And just before we went into the break, we interrogated aspects relating to youth representation in political parties today. We looked into aspects relating to youth engagement in decision making. And then lastly, we also focused on barriers to youth inclusion. But then before we went, we also talked about the voter turnout of young people in the recent elections, which possibly is a factor that we also had to interrogate. But let's just take the conversation now to youth-led initiatives and movements, Jamada. I think that's an area that I want you to maybe throw more light in. You understand that even in history, youth-led movements have been very pivotal in instilling change or in bringing forth change in any country. But recently there's been youth movements have been shrinking. What could cause that? But then too, how can we spark the spirit of activism in young people to possibly engage in decision making, among others? Yeah.
Well, speaking from Uganda, it's quite difficult to talk about any group-led movements because there's been clear suppression of the right to protest and associate within this country, especially for young people. There's no question about that, and I do not want to pretend that there hasn't been any sort of thing. And I want to give clear examples that even in instances where we've had protests by young people, they've been very curated and young people are being used. For example, we had a protest against ECOP. No, we had a protest against people who are against ECOP. And they surely picked a number of students from schools, had them marching around the city during school time in their school uniform with police support. But when young people want to protest about, let's say, school fees, high school fees or tuition within their institutions, they are immediately beaten and thrown onto vans. So there is clearly a deliberate effort everywhere around this country to ensure that no one, especially not young people, can protest or express their disgruntlement towards government or any organization through their right to protest. But that being said, I think it's important to understand, again, I want to take this discussion back to the aspirations of young people, that the few demonstrations that we've legitimately had, or protests that we've legitimately had that have involved young people and have spanned for a long period of time, for example, the school fees must fall, both in South Africa and in Uganda, we're dealing with pertinent issues that affect young people. I like how this discussion started with the statement that we are dealing with post-liberation politics, which means that in all truth and honesty, I do not think that we are still in the phase of liberating ourselves. We have systems which are very much questionable. which need improvement or complete overhauls, but we are not in a position where we are seeking liberation. And when a lot of people present this as the greatest challenge that young people or the country is facing, they are rarely successful at being able to mobilize youth and young people into activism and protest. So discussions like we are removing the dictator may not be as successful as you would think they would be, because I do not think, my conclusion would be that it's very much of a trigger, or it's enough of a trigger to put people on the streets. We had demonstrations in regards to walk to work, which was a protest against fuel prices. And you saw that that brought a lot of people onto the streets. But when it's an open blanket of it's me against Museveni, Museveni should not be in power, it really seems like you are serving yourself and just wanting to be president after Museveni leaves, and not necessarily serving any particular interest. And I think that is one of the core reasons why youth protests or youth movements in the country are being unsuccessful, but that is in no way questioning the deliberate efforts that have been taken to suppress the right to protest of young people and everyone in the country.
Perfect. OGUTU, political education for youth. I'm aware, I think in the year 2013 or 10, thereabout, the president went ahead and abolished political education in schools. But nonetheless, have there been any efforts in saying that we have political education for the youth of this country, or that has been futile?
Well, political education, I think those, I don't know whether we would say 21st or 20th century, didn't get a chance to be exposed to, but it goes back to you as an individual, because even the education system to reach where it is right now has been a tug of war. Yeah. And the successful ones have benefited, and there are still those that haven't benefited up to now. Now, speaking of efforts to access political education in a country where if a youth is involved in politics, he's looked at as a threat, it's something challenging. I want to use an example of Robert Chagulanyi. He beat two prominent politicians in this country, Sitenda Sebalu of the NRM and Apollo Kantinti of the FDC by then. But he made it as an independent to parliament and started a youth movement titled People Power. Now, the 1995 Constitution actually provides for people power. And I think I would give him credit for exposing that aspect to the masses, because very many people did not understand what people power was. Unfortunately, in one way or the other, it lost track. And those that did not look at the end goal lost value to the extent that now it was titled removing a dictator, which very many people lost it at the end of the day. So very many people remain, very many youth remain unexposed to political education, what it entails, and what it clearly it is intended to provide to the masses. I personally believe that a person who has been exposed to knowledge is unfit to be a slave. And these lessons, we can't speak about politics, democracy, youth involvement, political education, and we don't mention the man who's spoken of in Africa. That is Nelson Mandela, okay? And he's one person who led a group at a time that they didn't expect him to be such vigorous and push for change in his country. So it comes back to we as the young people. I like the way, I think my sister here was the one speaking about the aspirations that the youth should have. To what extent should it lead to visible outcomes? And that is where my challenge goes back to the National Youth Council. I really don't see its value today.
No, this is personal.
Because it's not personal.
Personal.
It's overall.
Personal against the entire
no,
organization.
yeah, it's personal. Okay, let's say it's personal against the entire organization. Of what value and of what benefit has the National Youth Council helped the young people in this country?
No, they have actually.
Yes, they have.
They have a great
They
deal.
seem to
But-
have a number of
Subjective.
sympathizers.
No, and now you
But to what extent?
you see, that's the problem we have as young people. If I woke up and I said I want to join the NRM, my neighbor would be like, "Guy, are you serious? We have Noop around fighting for our rights." But look at the divisions. I recently was following the youth elections in the FDC because a colleague of mine, Okori Brian, was actually vying for the position there. He's my very good friend. Unfortunately, when we were in secondary school, he was the entertainment prefect. Today, he's one of the people who is pushing for change in this country. And I don't blame him. Giving you an example is the president of Madagascar. Many of you here do not know that that gentleman was a DJ, but he's president, okay? So if Mr. Chagulanyi comes up and says he wants to be the president of today, why do people look at him as a threat in terms of violence and causing unnecessary death for innocent souls, as the other people may say it? So it goes back to our exposure to political education. You know, accessing knowledge is a weapon that very many people undermine. But it goes back to we, as the young people, what do we want? Okay? What result are we looking at getting at the end of the day? And just like the way I told you, whether we want it or we don't want it, the government has instilled in fear of, has intensified fear, let me say like that. Intensified fear, and because fear has been intensified, we are not reasoning to the expected outcomes because we are putting emotions up than the reason. That is the truth at the end of the day. You're going to talk about Bobby Wine being beaten. Trust me, Bobby Wine is not the first person to be beaten. If you go back to history, the exact events of November, the way they happened in Luka and Kampala, is the very way they happened in Kenya when Harry Tuku was being arrested for the first time because he was vying for the rights of the youth. He was arrested, they protested, the government killed them, and he went into exile. Same thing that happened here. So what is the end result at the end of the day? Is it just you being in office, or you have sold out yourself, you have sold out your ideology to the people? At the end goal, it should be nationalism for all of us. But if we focus on removing the dictate and then we are not in the right direction, it should be there, but the end goal is what is the quality of the youth you're selling out to the public is what matters to me.
Perfect.
Yes.
Alice, policy advocacy by youth. That's what I want to focus the conversation on. To what extent are young individuals involved in advocating for policies that directly affect them?
I think, like I was saying before, I think my view is evident from my earlier submission that it seems that youth involvement has more to do with optics than it does with their actual views. So how are they, to what extent are they involved in policy advocacy? Well,
Directly, yeah.
by the picture of things, I think that it looks pretty good. It looks pretty good that we have a lot of youth. But to the substance of the matter, what is their impact? What is the impact of their views to that exact policy that they are being included in? I think that the youth are not really being represented. I think they're just being brought into the room to show a good picture, but not because they're actually going to be listened to at the end of the day. And you can even see it from I'd argue that in Uganda we hardly have parties that have mentorship programs. Yeah. They are not mentorship programs, they are recruitment programs. There's a difference. There is a lot more focus to having these people show up in the party systems. As you see, we have these people. We have had a big number of youth integrated into our systems. We have them in our system rather than mentoring them, letting them actually grow, nurturing their ideologies and having them contribute back to the parties and also to the country. We do not see that. We do not see that in the country. Youth-led organizations as well. We have them running all over the place. We have a lot of engagements with the youth, but substantially, we do not see the ideologies and the things that the youth want or are advocating for being included in the systems, in the very systems that they're being called in to seek their opinions in. And I think that that's a very big problem. So I'd argue that there is literally no engagement of the youth in making of policies for the country, but not even just for the country, for the political parties, because it's a discussion about multi-party democracy. I would want to thank the Netherlands Institute of Multi-Party Democracy. I have attended one of their programs, the Uganda Dialogue Arena, and they were trying to see that different youth across different parties in the country are brought together in one room, not to fight, but to each mold each other. They say iron sharpens iron, and these guys have faith in us that we are iron. And we had people being brought in from different areas, to talk to us about different aspects. It wasn't just about who should be in power. It was about, as a person, how can you better your overall contribution to the society you're in as a leader, because most of the people in that room were leaders, youth leaders in one aspect or another. So even more than who should be in power and who should we get into power, there was a discussion on how we as the youth can build ourselves as leaders, to better lead and also to have other people that we are leading also contribute, you see. So if we had a lot more of those, if we had systems that are aiming more towards building the youth and actually listening to their contributions and actually intend on integrating their contributions into the national systems, then I think that it would go a long way in building this nation and would not have a lot of people trying to, retaliate and overthrow governments, because ultimately they're being listened to, right? That's literally what we want at the end of the day. It doesn't matter who is really in the chair. At least it shouldn't matter who really is in the chair. It should be, as a person in the chair, are you listening to us? Are you representing us? Are you chasing your personal interests and goals? Or are you actually listening to the people that you're leading?
All right. Andrew, I would like you to assess youth perception on multi-party politics in Uganda. Generally, young people in this country have a negative attitude towards politics. When you tell someone, do you watch maybe this show? Be like, there's a way they say it in Uganda. They say, something like that. Like we have left those things. So what are young people's perception when it comes to multi-party politics in this country?
Thank you very much. First, I want to start by disagreeing that the youth are actually not interested in politics. The conversations the youth are tired of having are conversations of a transition. At least one from the current government. But actually, research shows that Ugandan youth, are one of they form up one of the largest groups of youth, first of all, and they are very much interested in politics. So the conversations that Ugandans are tired of having are conversations of them going to the polling station to cast their ballot and change perhaps the government and maybe change a leader, something like that. Because if the youth weren't interested in politics, wouldn't have so many of them dying in the recent, 3 years back, when you saw the massacre that happened on November 18th, So the youth perception on politics is a positive one. To me, it's a positive one because youth in Uganda actually run for so many positions,
Yeah.
if you're to compare.
Yeah.
Just that the issue that we are having is that the facilities to facilitate themselves throughout the elections in a monetarized society like that of Uganda is the one that they lack. Because you're going to find that a youth in a certain district somewhere, just like most of the districts, you're going to find that someone is contesting. Someone who's 24 is contesting. You're contesting against someone who is 50 or 47 perhaps. This person has been in parliament for over 3 terms. They have the money, they have the connections, and they know how to play the game better than you. You may know how to play the game, but they have the resources to play the game that you want to play. You get? So at the end of the day, even if you want, even if you use which kinds of means, it's going to be almost impossible. Just take an example in these elections of youth MP, National Youth Council, even things as simple as UNSA. The amount of money you have to inject in just to get there.
Commercialization of politics.
Yeah, commercialization of politics, So at the end of the day, the youth perception really it's going to be one that is it's a strong drive to participate in the politics, but it is being dimmed down by these underlying factors.
Yeah.
So to me, the youth, the perception of youth in politics on politics is a very positive one. And if we had a society that was willing to let us participate in politics, I believe that would be the generation that is going to drive in better leadership. Because I want to give us the benefit of the doubt that we are good students of history, and we are learning. That is the reason as to why we have these conversations, is that we are learning, and there are some things that we would not want to see. Just the benefit of the doubt. I don't know what the future holds, but it would be very disappointing for us to come here and have these conversations. Then at the end of the day, they're also posting our videos in future. It would be really, really, really disappointing. So I want to believe it's a positive one, and I know there's still hope. I know there's still hope. Yeah, but there's a lot that still needs to be done.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jamada, we're reaching towards the end of our conversation, but we cannot have this conversation and forget to talk about the impact that technology and social media has in terms of youth engagement in politics. So I'd like you to assess the impact that tech is having on youth engagement in politics.
A threat in a way that if we misuse the information that we have, then we are doomed for danger. A threat still that if someone else misdirects us because of the amount of access that they have towards us, that's also a great problem. But a big opportunity, because now we know, we can see live what our leaders are doing, and we can hold them accountable directly. When someone is annoyed at the president, I don't know if he sees his Twitter page, but he often posts there and he says Bazuku. So when someone is annoyed at him, you can as well go on that platform and send out your attack.
Is it the best way?
No, but communicate. Attack is an overstatement, but communicate your disgruntlement at that level. And I've seen some people who have been responding to in some instances. So technology serves that opportunity of creating a smaller society, especially when it comes to governance. But then I think one of the threats, and I know a lot of people disagree with me at this, is people thinking that because they've expressed their views online, that should be enough and them not to take action. So just because you've voted on Twitter or you've spoken against something on Twitter, it doesn't mean that when you get the opportunity to cast an actual vote, you should stay at home. It means that even when the actual voting comes up and you have the opportunity to influence who is going to lead you, you should be able to get out of your house and go vote. So the shadow or the screen that social media and technology has created should not be a source of should not block us or make us cowards from actually practicing the politics and influencing what goes on within our countries in the actual fields of governance, in parliament, or during elections. But I think also something that is very important to note is that young people now have a great opportunity for them to participate in actual politics through the internet and through social media. Right now, you can start up a campaign as a young person by posting a video on YouTube or on Twitter or on Facebook, and you'll be able to tap into other young people that are existing. And governments recognize this, but then it's also important that we also recognize this and use the power that we have. Now we have them, they can see us, and we should be able to talk to them directly. And I think that's the game changer that technology and social media is.
All right, thank you. So we have reached the end of our conversation, but I would just like to quickly get your thoughts, all of you. I'll start with Andrew, as a way of your recommendations and your parting shots to tonight's conversation.
Thank you very much. My parting shots are not going to differ so much from what I started with and how I've been, where I've been directing my conversation. It is not rocket science now that we make up majority, the youth make up majority of the population. And on that, again, it is not rocket science that, this comes from a statement by a great man. I call him great because of what he did for his country, His Excellency Jakaya Kikwete. I had a chance to listen to one of his conversations, and he said that the youth are the future of tomorrow, because for him, as a person, he's 70-something. And in 50 years, even if he wants, he will not be there. That is a realization our leaders have to come to. That in 30 years, even if they're to be there, they won't be competent at all. At all. At least science has proven us wrong, that it can't happen. Even the people with the best care, like the Queen, couldn't be that effective at that age. And these are facts, So when we come to that realization, and our leaders come to that realization, then they must start acting like as if they are our fathers and they see a future for us, So my recommendation is simple. We need to deconstruct the structures in this country and have structures that are going to enable smooth transition of leadership, even if it's not to the youngest people, but to people who still have the capacity to run this country. The people who are there right now once had the capacity, but with time, these are natural factors.
Yeah.
With time, you deteriorate. So let us go, because even if we want this, if it doesn't start with the people up there, the people who are already there, our conversations are useless. Sorry to say, because it is those people to actually allow that, yes, it is time that we take a back seat and let these people come to the front.
All right. Alice,
Yes.
recommendations and parting shots.
Well, picking it up from the note that has been said, I think that if one day something happened and the president was no longer with us and was unable to lead, even from NRM itself, it would be hard to have a person take over from him, right? And there is a statement that is often said: a great leader isn't a person, is a person that makes sure that there is another person to take up from him when he leaves. That's the hallmark of a great leader, that when you leave, you have someone that you've trained who is competent to take on from you or even be better, right? So I think it's clear that it's a problem that if the current government was to all move out, it would be hard to have people move into their place. The transition that he was talking about, we need to have structures that allow for transition down different generations, right? So that as people move out, the people who are well trained, who are competent to move in, just like that. And what does this lead us to? Mentorship programs, especially for parties. If a party does not have a proper mentorship program, then it's definitely going to showcase into the ideologies of its members, but also the contribution of its members to the country, right? So even in our different ideologies, we should have pretty firm foundation in I think principles that should be canvassing all over. Doesn't have to escape us that even as we disagree, there are some fundamental principles that we should all agree on and integrate into ourselves and into our political party systems before we go out there. Lastly, when we have youth in the room, right now I think we're having a lot of youth in the room. Before we used to have a conversation about the fact that we don't have youth in the room. Now we have youth in the room. But now that we have them in the room, what is the effect? What is the result? Result of optics, like I was saying, we have them. What is the result? Are they contribute? Are we actually listening to them, right? And lastly, for us to be able to be listened to as the youth, the argument of Jamada, as a young person, how effective are you in your communication, number one, and in the ideologies that you bring to the table? Are you worth being listened to? That would mean that we would not leave an excuse for the older generation to discredit our involvement. We don't want them to say that, well, we had these people at a round table talk and they did not give anything substantial, right? So even as we are trying to vie for involvement and being listened to, and our ideologies and ideas being integrated into the overall system, we should make sure that the ideologies we actually have, the things that we want to contribute, are things that are going to take the nation forward, that we are actually worth being listened to. And if we had the chance to take on opportunities, or the steering wheel would not drive the country into a tree.
Yeah, perfect. Councillor OGUTU and TITUS.
I think I will also pick up from where she stopped, just like though she picked up from there, because she has really exhausted what I wanted to say.
You concur with the judgment, the manager.
Yes, I with respect after reading it. So my recommendations wouldn't differ, and personally, I feel the youth can be of an impact to this country, regardless of what political party they fall in, whether you're in NRM or FDC or NUP, or not even being in a political party, because the challenges we face are the same, okay? And just like the way Jamada was answering the question to do with technology, you realize in 2018, the social media tax, it didn't discriminate. That is something not being done in Uganda. And just like the way they came together during the social media tax, it should be the same spirit they have within themselves to have better results at the end of the day. Because I feel the challenges are the same they face as young people. And whether NRM or FDC, NUP, JEMA, if it comes to decision making, you clearly see that they face the same challenges.
Even within their parties.
Yeah, even within their parties. So if that can be resolved with a clear institutional structure of youth-led people that believe that change can happen in Uganda, and then we could get better results at the end of the day. That would be my recommendation.
All right, thank you. Jamada.
I think, again, as we've been going, I concur with everything that has been said previously by everyone. And I would like to add, again, that for young people, all of us, we are always told that we are the future of this country. We've been so, and as was said, a lot of people may not be around 30 years from now, but if God wishes, we will. And that means that whether it's our time now or it will be our time later, at least we have one thing that we can make sure of when we see everything that is going wrong. And that is that we can teach ourselves to be better leaders, leaders that care about their communities, leaders that care about democracy, human rights, the development of people and their employment, and acquaint ourselves with information and the capacity to create effective change within our country. And if we can do that now, and the political parties that exist or the government structures that exist, or even NGOs, assist us in training us and giving us a platform, we can actually be the future that will address most of the challenges that have been talked about in this discussion. My message is always one of hope, and that is, we are here and we'll have more time. And because of that, we can only prepare for the amazing, great things that we will do in the future.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much to you all, our dear panelists. It's been wonderful having you here, Kalinda, Jamada, Musa, OGUTU TITUS, Alyce Namale, and Andrew Kinobere, for taking time to engage in this very wonderful discussion and giving your insights. From Civic Space and Center for Constitutional Governance, we say thank you. To the production team, thank you very much for sparing time to make sure that this is out there on time, and for our viewers for spending time to watch these young people put out their wonderful thoughts and views out there. Otherwise, my name is Douglas Drake. I've been your host for tonight's conversation. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.